morning. My name is Pat Blanchard, and it is my honor and pleasure to interview William Thomas Johnson in conjunction with the Conejo Valley chapter of the Daughters of the American Revolution and the Colonial Dames of the 17th Century for the Veterans History Project with the Library of Congress. This interview is being recorded by Ed Lynch from Advanta Videography and contains collections and memories of the veterans and his time in the United States Armed Forces. Today is March the 29th, 2019, and we are in the California Veterans Home in Ventura, California. William, who likes to be called Tom, was born in Pomona, California to William Johnson and Marguerite Wimmerly on February 17, 1931. He has two children, Diana and Carl. Tom is a graduate of Pomona High School, and he graduated in 1949. This is Tom's story.
Thank you, Pat, for the introduction. Pat is a volunteer, and we also have doing the visual is Ed, and he's volunteering. And I'm volunteering because I'd like to think I have a story that would benefit the listener who watches this, because hopefully I will help you to enrich your own lives by what I say, from what I've learned. Yes, what I wanted to say about volunteering is when you're in the military, there's some wisdom that the troops have: never volunteer. Well, here I just told you about 3 of us that volunteered, and I also volunteered to go into the Naval Reserve. So all I can say is if you're in the military, you do have to be cautious of what you volunteer for. But I did a fair amount of volunteering in the community where I lived most of my life, and I got a great deal of benefit from that as well. Okay. As Pat said, I was born in Pomona, which is an agricultural area. I was born at the beginning of the Depression. My father died in 1940 when I was 9, and that left my mother in the job of taking care of my sister and in the household, and so part of that was I learned to be, in a sense, a man of the house, which meant doing the yard work and taking the trash out and things like that. So I was lucky to have some father figures in the community and family that helped me to be a boy. Now, when I was a boy, I had 10 soldiers, and war meant the good guys and the bad guys. And at that time, during the Second World War, when I was growing up, it was the Japanese and the Germans that were the bad people, and that was kind of simplified. And I made model airplanes as well as the soldiers, and we saw the war pictures on the movies when we went to the theater every Saturday. So that was my kind of understanding of being military, which means you get rid of the enemies. Okay.
Why'd you join the Navy?
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. I was going to high school. Well, before I went to high school, I got interested in the weather because we were in agriculture. My father was in the nursery business. The weather was very important. So I was going to want to be a meteorologist. So I took physics and math in high school. At that point, when I was a senior in 1949, I saw this picture in a magazine, on the cover of the magazine, that said, the magazine was named Weatherwise. And on the front cover was this sailor taking a weather observation in what we used to call the instrument shelter. And I said, that's what I want to do. And this was going to happen at the Los Alamitos Naval Air Station, which was not too far from us, more about closer to Long Beach. So I made that choice, and I was only 17, so I needed my mother's permission. But she was nice enough to drive me down there and apply. So for the next 2 years, I was in the reserve on the weekends. Well, it was only one weekend a month. No, it was over the weekend, yeah. And then during the summer, we had a 2-week thing when it was kind of a boot camp. Now, boot camp is where you're supposed to learn how to be a sailor. And one of the things I remember is we were given a whole number of things: our uniform, our shoes, our pea coat, but we were also given dog tags, which right here, and there's 2 dog tags. And the interesting story about that is when they find your body in the battlefield, and you apparently look dead, somebody takes this back as identification to back where you are, but you leave the second one in case when somebody else comes and finds you. But anyway, we were issued these, but I found out they were not very much used. Most people did not wear them because they were just not very necessary. The funny thing about it, when you look at this, it gives you, the P stands for Protestant, my religion, and the O is my blood type. But it isn't my blood type. Now, I never bothered to change it because, I wasn't going to be on the battlefield. Anyway, they don't use these very much, but it goes back many centuries about dog tags in soldiers, because a lot of them were left on the field, and maybe the enemy doesn't know who you are either. So, okay, so I did sign up in the reserve, went to the boot camp, and I was going to say, a lot of boot camp is marching, for one thing. We call it the grinder. It was a Marine sergeant that grinded. We call it the grinder that we marched. There were probably about 20 or 30 of us in a platoon type of thing. And so we would march, but a lot of that, because one of the important things of being in the military, you follow orders. And what they're doing when you're marching, you're given orders. Left march, right march, reverse. I've even forgotten the terms, or halt, attention, at ease. Parade rest, I remember now. So one thing you learn really quickly is obey orders. And if the order seems too outlandish, ask questions, but just don't do them. Just don't do them, but say, why are we doing this? Sometimes they don't like that. But anyway, I found that was helpful later on in the world. But okay, so I did that for 2 years. I was called a recruit, and then in 1940, well, anyway, I can't remember the year, 51, I think it was, I got a draft notice that I was going to be drafted because of the Korean War. When I first went in to the reserve, that we were not at war, but now we were at war, and I got this draft notice. And at the time, I was going to a community college, and I kind of well, obviously, rather than get drafted, I'd rather be recruited into the active reserve. So I said to him, well, I've only got 2 more weeks before my semester's over with. And they said, okay, we'll delay you being recruited. And I thought, gee whiz, they're kind of nice people. So I did go in, because that was right at the end of the semester anyway, at the time of summer, I guess, or whatever it was. But, so they called us weekend warriors. And I would imagine there's probably 300 or 400 or something, quite a few reservists there on the weekends. Of course, I was doing the straggle the weekends, I think, but I'm just going to read my notes here a little bit. Oh, you start learning first of all, I don't think I mentioned this before, but you're issued the uniform, and then you're also issued the Blue Jacket Manual. And this was something like, I forgot, something like 500 or 600 pages thick. And you're supposed to learn that because you were tested on it. And So that was one thing you were issued at, but you were also learning the language. And there's all kinds of words for different things. But some of the words I think about is the latrine, the head. The head was the bathroom. I can't remember some of the terms, because remember, this is about 50 or 60 years ago that this experience, and lots happened to them. We learned port and starboard. We learned what it was to be on liberty. And if you were AOW, AWOL, that stands for absent without leave, you were put in the brig. And nobody wanted to be in the brig, but I wanted to go back and think. When I joined, I don't know if I said this before, but when I joined the reserve, I wasn't thinking about belonging to the Navy. I was thinking about I wanted some training as a weather observer, which they called it an aerographer. Aerographer is someone who does works observing the weather as well as plotting charts and helping the meteorologists there. Okay. I got issued, it's called the first dress clothes they give you wool. And I never did like wool, but that you didn't have a choice. But you could wash them just as well as anything else. You had to, because you had to wash your own clothes. And I don't remember, but when I remember this, you had bare bones. You didn't have a lot because your locker was not very big. So, but everything was on time. You went to the dining room at the same time, and you had to. And you learn about watches. Now watches are usually 4 hours, but sometimes they, but when you're an aerographer, you're there any shift, all the way through, because the weather station, the weather place where the meteorologists go, is open 24 hours a day, because obviously flights are coming in and now 24 hours a day. I wanted to say that I joined the Navy well, I said this before, but that was a choice I did make, and I found it was a very good decision to make, because I benefited a great deal. So we're going to go on with that. When I got called up to duty, I was only there at Naval Air Station a while at Los Alamitos, because they transferred us to Navy North Island, where I stayed for probably 4 or 5 months, and I learned at that time that I was part of a squadron. I never knew I was a part of a squadron. Oh, I wanted to go back. Let me go back to the Naval Air Station boot camp, because this is important. But what's important is often what your actions do affect other people. So you just can't do what you want to do. You do what your orders are. And this applied on the Naval Air Station during boot camp. We learned the pilots were learning, putting in their hours in Naval Air Station on the weekend as well. And they were flying these 2-engine transports. Were from World War II, but they were combustion engine. We didn't have jet planes at that time. So there were the planes landed up there on the parking where the planes were. Maybe there were 10 of them, 8 of them, but the pilots would take a trip every week they were there to some of their place. So what we would do with the planes in the morning, one of the first things we'd learn to do this is to check out the plane. And those combustion engines were ran with oil lubricants. So in the morning, every morning, in the morning the pilots were going to fly, they were probably getting their flight plan at the time, we would check the plane. And first thing you do is you turn the propellers over, because you want to get the oil circulating in the engine. Then you go in and start the engines, see what the oil pressure was, what the temperature was, and you check out the rudder and the aileron and the flaps and so forth to check out they're working okay. So we would try to do 3 or 4, each one would take a plane or two and learn that. So that was we were trying to, we were preparing the pilot. And so the pilot depended on us to some degree, but so what they would do is we would go with them for the weekend trip. We went to Seattle one time, we went to Salt Lake City one time, went to Alameda one time, and we spent the weekend there. But they also snuck us in. We could fly the plane for 10 or 15 minutes sometimes, get the feeling of it. But the point a little bit is, all right, you said this plane is ready to fly, let's get in and fly. That's the way I get. But anyway, we kind of enjoyed that because you got to travel around and so forth. The other thing about knowing your job is when the planes came in, they have to be waved in. And the waving is, you're telling whoever's taxiing the plane into their parking spot after where they've been, is you signal them how to steer the airplane into the parking spot. So you'd wave them in. You'd have one hand here like saying, stop that thing, but turn to the right. So you wave them in to their parking spot. And this was tricky because what I remember so much is I was waving this plane in, and it came within about 1.5 feet of hitting the other plane. And they said, boy, I'd never do that again. But I felt so lucky I didn't hit the plane, because that would have been, because they depended on you doing your job. So that was kind of, I've got something to learn too. and there's kind of consequences as to when you do something, somebody's safety is involved. Other things. The other thing that just comes to mind, which is kind of humorous, because I was just started, and we learned how to take weather observations, but one of the jobs was to call up to the control tower and tell them what the altimeter setting was, because that was very important. The tower knew the altimeter setting, because that tells them what elevation they are based on air pressure. Well, we had to calculate that for that station. Well, the first time I did it, I said, well, the altimeter setting is 30.01. And their response was, oh, one of those. And I sure learned there's a difference between O and 0. And I have to this day, when people use O instead of 0, I said, that's important. Because, because the tower isn't going to tell the pilot your altimeter setting is 30.01. They're going to say, who are you? You don't know your job. So that was, so you're learning.
What about the time that you were in you called up to the observation?
Okay, all right, no, we'll move on with that. So when I got called up to San Diego, I was I was doing the routine thing that an aerographer does at the weather office there. Along with the meteorologist, there was a number of us that were aerographers. And part of the job was to go out to the shelter and take, I guess I said you'd take the temperature, the dew point, the rainfall as well. So how they send, every hour they send this observation that you've made to all over the country, because pilots, they want to know over the country what San Diego Naval Air Station weather is like, especially the visibility. The tower needs to know that. Mechanically, the way you do this is you take the observations, you write them down, and then there's you have a tape that you type in on the tape, perforations, that you go into a machine that reads that perforation. So what you do is you type it in, and hopefully you get that right, because you don't want to give the wrong ceiling or the wind or something like that. So you have to make sure that's double, okay. Then you put it in this device that reads it. Oh, the thing you need to know is all this stuff is done on teletype. All this stuff is, we didn't have we had some facsimiles, but we had this, it was called a call list or something. Every hour, all the stations would report onto this list and you had a position in the list, and the list was automatic. When your time came, your reporter, your transmitter sort of thing that you've done this tape on, automatically starts and gives the weather report. And the wave officer of it said, "Don't be late. We're getting too many." And the rest said, "If you send in a late observation, it goes to the bottom, and that makes us look bad." So, okay, that seems reasonable. So, but one day, for some reason or another, I got it late. So I got called in, and she said, "Don't do it again." Well, reasonable, but a little humiliating. But again, you got to do your job right, because what you do affects a lot of other people, and so you have to be held accountable. So I was there about 4 or 5 months, and again at that point I learned that I was a squadron. With a squadron that was going to be transferred to Japan. And I said, "Oh, wow, that's it." And then the wave officer, a different one, called me in and said, "Tom, your squadron is being transferred. Which one? Where do you want to go? To Tokyo, or to, I don't remember if it said Tokyo, but Japan, or to the Hawaiian Islands?" And I thought about 5 seconds, and I said, "I think I want to go to the Hawaiian Islands." So that's where I spent at Barbers Point, Naval Air Station at Barbers Point, which was on Oahu, outside, not too far from Honolulu. You could actually see some of the, we're close enough to see some of the, at least the hills behind Honolulu. And so, but what's nice about it was on the leeward side of the island, so the weather was great, the beaches were nice, and it's a pretty good sized naval air station. Now, why was Barbers Point important? Because a lot of airplanes were ferried, I think you call it, between San Francisco and Hawaii, and then they go on to maybe Midway or Wake Island to eventually Japan. Back in those days, that was quite a long trip to go on. Now the planes, to be safe, some of them going eastbound would fly at one elevation, like 8,000. They were only flying at 8. And somebody else, the other going the other direction would go 10,000 feet, so they won't collide. Because radar was working, but not, not that much. So anyway, part of our job was to put these charts together, because these charts would tell you what the wind. All right, part of because you have these planes, usually they're all engine, so some of them tend to ditch. And so if the pilot has to ditch a plane in the ocean, he wants to know what direction the wind is going while he's landing, so he can have the wind as an advantage of impacting you, hitting the water. So every pilot was given a chart showing the wind direction across the ocean, his route. Of course, he'd also give us, they would decide which way is the best way, because if you had the jet stream, they understood that you want to catch the jet stream, so your flight path might be different depending on what the wind directions were at the top elevation there. I mean, at those levels. So that was our job, and we would all, that was at Naval Air Station. Okay, let's move on. Is there anything else you need to say about
talking about the barracks at Barbers Point.
Yeah, I was going to go to Barbers Point. Oh, the next thing is, okay, Tom, you're going to go to Hawaiian Islands. Here's you're going to go on this ship. Well, it ended up being a Liberty ship. Liberty ship were from World War II, where they transported troops. And Ed is smiling a little bit, because they were known for the round bottom sort of thing. They were strictly troop ships. And so the first day I got seasick on the way to Hawaii, and I was supposed to be a sailor. So anyway, then they put me down in the laundry room down below, and I was a little better then, but I always that wasn't the best trip, but anyway, it took us 4 or 5 days to get there. And then of course, I went to Barbers Point, which was where I was going to station for the next couple of years, well, a year and a half anyway. And our housing, as you were just mentioning, it's an old Quonset hut, a large Quonset hut, left over, I'm sure, from World War II there. There's windows, but they don't need any heating. The temperature in the daytime is usually about 80, you can predict it, and 65 at night. So you didn't need any air conditioning or heating. You know, most thing is you want to keep the mosquitoes out. And we all lived in this barracks together that had these different shifts, because you could sleep during the day. Most sailors had to get up at a certain time. They all get to maybe have inspection, have their beds examined for neatness and things like that. But we could come and go as we wanted and sleep when we wanted, because if you came in at 8 o'clock in the morning and you have been up all night, so everybody's supposed to be quiet and so forth. But also, to keep the mosquitoes down, they would have a truck go through, I don't remember, once a week, if not more often, and the dust of DDT. They would dust the whole base with DDT, not having slightest idea. It killed the mosquitoes, but I don't know if anybody really got sick that much with it, but I'm just thinking the times have changed since then. I wouldn't think of that, but the food was good at Barbara's Point. What was great about it is, if you wanted to go to church, they let you off during your watch to go to church. I took a class at college there on the base, and that let me adjust my schedule to do that. And then I took a class, which I recommend. I'm not a class, but one in writing. I mean, a male, or the military used to at that time give you quite a few courses available. They send you the book, you study it, and then you take the test, and then you get some credit for it. This was world history, something like that I took. The crew, I've got a picture that you may see of the crew, some of the crew, being an officer or being a seaman or something didn't make much difference on the job. You were all doing a job, and there was, the formality was we were all pretty much equals. Some of them would play cribbage most of the night if it was slow night, and it didn't make any difference what your rank was. You could play cribbage. I didn't play cribbage, but they played poker some of the time. But and one of them would bring his old tape recorder and played music most of the time. So it was kind of relaxed, and but you had these teletype operators. You may have a bank of 4 or 5 teletypes running all the time, but otherwise.
Describe mail call.
Mail call? Well, mail call, I can't remember if it's daily or not, but it didn't seem like that daily, but, oh, yes, so you go, it's kind of announced, maybe it's the same time every week, I don't remember, you announce and go to call, and so they call out your name. You got a name, they call out, because everybody would circle around, and they would call out your name. You got a letter, you got 2 letters. A lot of them didn't get anything, but I happened to correspond with a girlfriend of mine that I had in Pomona. And so we wrote back and forth rather regularly. But the irony of this was, as soon as I got discharged, after about 2 or 3 weeks, we decided we were not suitable for each other. We entirely, basically, what happens when you go in the military, you go in as a boy and you come out as a man. And I think I was a little stronger as being a man that she was ready for. So we kind of laughed at that, but anyway. But we had the mail call, and the other thing is the pay call, when you get paid once a month, as I remember. I can't remember what the pay was. I was probably like $50 or something. But the funny thing was, we just needed some money. If you go into town, you got to buy some beer or cigarettes. A lot of people would smoke in those days, so you had that money to do that. But what was I saying about the pay line? There was a number of them would have somebody at the end waiting for, if you owed somebody money, your friend, quote friend, that borrowed money from you, is at the line there saying, okay, give me my share. That's a guarantee because he gave it to you in cash. Because most of them didn't have bank accounts at that, where we, well, they might have had one on the base or something, but anyway, there's a certain, you get the, everybody's different in their own ways about how they do these things, so you kind of have to have a little humor and interest in people and the way they behave under these different circumstances. Oh, there's really only two places. You could take the bus from there into town or some other place. But I bought, and this, not too many of them did it, but there was a number of cars always available, old cars available, because when you got shipped back home or to somewhere else, you couldn't take your car with you. I mean, a few of them had their car shipped, but that's prohibitive to have your car shipped from California or somewhere else. So you just sell it to the next person that needed it. So this car I got, the only thing that was wrong with it was the radiator. It would overheat too fast, but I didn't repair it. But it was great to be able to jump in my car and take a trip down to Hawaii or to the beach. So we would go to what they call Waikiki Beach, which was an old military camp, but pretty much deserted when we went. So we could spend a weekend there sometimes, because I remember they had a place to sleep there too. So again, I have a picture that you might see showing me with the surfboard there. So the beach was a nice place to go to. The other thing I wanted to mention is one of the things my sister really helped me is taught me how to play tennis. And I played tennis almost all of my life. It wasn't just a few years ago I stopped. But I took my tennis racket with me all the time when I was in the Navy. And occasionally, not very often, but I would go down to the Royal Hawaiian or one of the fancy hotels, walk right in as if I was a resident and play tennis with them. There was no tennis court. The base didn't have a swimming pool, as I can remember, and they didn't have tennis court. I think they had volleyball maybe or something. But on the sports thing, you didn't have base. I can't even remember if baseball was. Anyway, I kind of enjoyed that old car because it didn't get around, and then I just quickly be able to sell it when the next one wants to come along. So they were very flexible in the shifts that we did, and the officers. Did I say anything about saluting? You know, you're taught in boot camp to salute officers, and it's usually, I think, captain or above or something. I can't remember. I don't think lieutenants deserve it, but you're supposed to. When you pass a officer, you know, immediately stand attention and salute him while they pass, and he's supposed to salute back. Well, when you get onto the Naval Air Station, we all agree that's, you know, we don't need to do that. They don't want to sit there saluting every time. So what you learn in boot camp often doesn't, sometimes just doesn't apply when you go out in the Navy sort of thing. But the Korean conflict was going on at that time. We kept up with it to some degree, but I don't remember. We just listened on the radio, I guess, when we were on duty, what was going on. But we would also have aircraft come from the carriers onto our base too, for who knows? I didn't get involved in it. And we get different countries. I just came to mind here. We get pilots from different parts of the country too, and I remember the world. And I remember we had a pilot in there one time, and he was from Australia. And all at once I began to sing the Australian national anthem. I don't know where that came from. And he turned around and said, "Hey, thank you." Those were kind of little funny moments that they played. So when my time was up, when being a reservist, you had a certain period of time you automatically did your tour, I guess you call it. So I got flown back to Fraser Island by San Francisco, in the San Francisco Bay. Uniform. Let me talk about uniform, because when we were issued uniforms in boot camp, you got the regular blue suit, and then you got tropics, which was white. Almost all the pictures you're going to see are in the white tropic. suit, which were white. A little more difficult to wash because you couldn't, anyway, they would reissue it. But when I carried my, I carried my peacoat all along. I shouldn't need to mention this because you always have to be in the military. You have to be ready to move. You just don't, But some of them on the base had residence off the base, but that was almost always they rented a base because they had a family there. But we had something called I think it was called a duffel bag, or close to it. It's a big bag that you have to carry everything you own in that duffel bag. And see, I had to use that duffel bag to go from Navy North Island to Barbers Point. Then I had to repack it and go back. So that would weigh about 50, 60 pounds anyway, because you had my tennis racket in there and a few other things and a few letters that you had. So, so we went to Treasure Island. Boy, Treasure Island is almost like mine because it's cold, and they had to go outside and clean up. They want you to keep busy while they get you discharged stuff, because that's where I was going to get discharged from. But I sure remember, I was sure glad to have that peacoat. The first time I worn it in almost 2 years. Later on, I gave it to a girlfriend because we didn't need to wear a peacoat Pomona that much. Anyway, that was a girlfriend, I guess you. But anyway. So I was only there about 3 or 4 days, and then of course they pay you to go home. They gave me a bus fare to go home, and so that was the end of that. I do want to share a little bit. Do you have anything else you think I should cover, Pat?
Once you got out, you said your mom never liked to save anything.
Yeah.
And you want to talk about your 1940 Ford?
Yeah. I earned most of the money. I worked at a knitting mill when I was going to high school, but I earned enough money to buy a car. It was a 1940 Ford with a new engine in it. Boy, and it had a rumble seat in it. After about a week, I got a ticket for speeding, I think. But anyway, so I had that during high school, and I went to community college with it. But when I got called up, what was I going to do with that car? Well, I wanted to put it on blocks in my car, in my garage. So that's what I did, and I figured, well, I'm going to be back, I'm going to need a car. Well, my mother wrote to me after I've been there about a year and said, school teacher wants my car, and I want to get rid of your car is in the way. Well, I figured, well, that's what she wants to do, that's what she did. So my mother got, and my dear mother, which I have a great deal of respect for, would tend to throw things away because she did. She had to, her life as a child, that's a whole other story. They were constantly moving, so you didn't save very much.
Well, I want to know after you got the job in the shoe store, and what did you do there? And
the shoe store, did I tell you that? Well, after I got, okay, I'm going to complete this a little bit. What happened to me after I got out of the service? Because I went back and finished my AA degree at community college. Then I went and worked for the. I better add this on. After that, I started working for the Weather Bureau, which is on LAX at the Los Angeles airport. At that point, everything was, airport was nothing like this. We were on the second floor of the main lobby. And we were in the National Weather Service for the whole area there. Well, see, because I wanted to become a meteorologist, and so, boy, I'll find out about this rate. Because I got hired pretty quickly because veterans got priority, and I already had the experience. So I did that for a couple of years, but I was watching these fathers, husbands, coming in all these different shifts with their families, and some of them even had duty in the Aleutian Islands, and they were telling me that was no fun. The only thing to do was fish. And so so if you work for the government as a weather forecaster, they can send you wherever you want. Your family had to go. So I said, I don't really want to be, what I saw them doing but see, they didn't have radar at that point. I mean, they didn't have satellite. Everything was teletype, facsimiles. So anyway, I decided I didn't want to be a meteorologist. So I started going back. I forgot how I did that. I went back to Long Beach State College in Long Beach, and I started taking classes in social sciences, and I really enjoyed that. So for the last year or so, I can't remember the details too much, but well, I did graduate in 1960, and I think I said this already about. See, I was not married at the time. I was free to do what I wanted. They gave me the choice of going to. Oh, I guess I didn't say this about. They say, all right, there's some jobs as being a social worker with certain counties. One of them was Imperial Valley, Imperial County. The other one was Ventura. I said, no, I know Imperial Valley because that's where my parents lived. I know how hot it is. So I determined Ventura. That was one of the smarter jobs. So anyway, there and I met my wife there soon afterwards. And I worked there as a social worker for a couple of years, and then I became a supervisor in the welfare department. And they came up to me one day and they said, Tom, the state of California is giving some grants out to those who want to go to USC and get their master's degree. Boy, it didn't take me long to say, yeah. I was single. I didn't want to be a supervisor with the county. It was not terribly interesting. So that was one of the big opportunities in my life. And so the year after that, I got married in between my first and second year, got my master's degree, came back and did certain obligations, and my social work career was very positive from then on because I became a licensed clinical social worker, licensed LCSW, licensed clinical social worker, which means you can get a job pretty much anywhere. So they requalify. So anyway, so that was that part of it. But there are a number of things I learned from the military. I want to tell you a little bit about how that benefits you when you get out in the real world. First of all, ask questions. If you don't understand something, ask questions. Don't feel embarrassed. Because especially in the military, if you don't understand what you're doing, because I've heard from other veterans in the world, and sometimes you get orders that just are not, they're brutal. Take that hill. Well, we can't tell you why or where. Anyway, so question authority to some degree. But I would tell the people I was working with, the welfare department, the people that we have all kinds of rules that you're supposed to do, requirements of eligibility for people. And I said, well, all right, your job is to do the rules. Who's eligible, who isn't, what you do if this happens, district attorney's office is involved, fathers are. I said, know the rules. Because if you know the rules, you know how to break them. Because if you got a good reason for breaking the rule, which there are times for humanity or something, or it just is not kosher, break the law if you feel that professionally it's the right thing to do. And then be ready to say, yes, I knew this because, and you plead your case. So that...
How do you think the service affected you in later life?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Part of that was that, but, I want to kind of tell you the progression of what war means, because that's partly why I'm talking today, because over the years, I was enduring the Korean conflict. We're still, to this day, 2019, trying to figure out the North and South Korean conflict. I used to call it conflict, because we never had an armistice, I think. But my whole understanding of the war, because of part of the training I got in boot camp was pretty much the enemy is this and we've got to beat the enemy and that kind of thing. And then then the current situation is something else. But Um, War is hell. War should be avoided. And to be, I'm getting maybe off a little philosophical thing there, but be a good citizen. Learn how that your job as a citizen in this country is to be involved in your communities if you can. Because you see, in the military, you're kind of told, don't volunteer under any condition. And I'm afraid too many people take that in the civilian, don't volunteer. Well, I say, yeah, but you're missing a lot of opportunities in serving with people who, anyway. But to answer your question, I just think we need to be aware of letting our politicians jump into war when, and so the thing to do is vote and to be aware of the issues from good sources and be a good citizen. And I try to tell young people when I get a chance, when you go to school, don't always put your career and money ahead of taking some courses that give you a liberal education. Anything from civics to geography, history. Because if you don't know these things, how can you make a good decision based on your knowledge? And I think that's very true nowadays in 2019. So that's my little speech. I'll tell you some of the other benefits. I just want to put this down to being a veteran. When I got married, I was able to get a Calvet loan, which really small monthly payment, and that was great. I also used my GI Bill for some education. Long Beach State, I think I used it for there. So, and now here I am, at Calvet home in Ventura, living adequately. So thank you for the opportunity of letting me share with you what I hope is helpful to everyone who hears this.
Thank you.
So I have one thing I'm always interested in.
Yes.
How do you feel your military experience changed you as a person?
Well, I think I tried to say it when I said from being a boy to a man. And, well, first of all, I think some of it is group living. You have, when you're living at home, and you might, then, most marry and then they'll go and rent a house. But, because that helped me a lot coming here, because living in the military, you're only, you had to follow the protocol, some people would say, to do it. But what's nice about the military, for a lot of people it's very attractive, it's very orderly. You do this, you do that, under that circumstances, you don't have to think much about it. You just do it. As long as you do it, you keep out of trouble. You don't go to the brig. Of course, if some of them did. But I don't know, maybe that's too simplified of an answer, but because, see, when I look back, that happened 50 years ago. See, and so much has happened in between, it's hard to say. But you do learn more about people, because you're thrown in together with a lot of people. I remember the lockers. We used to have lockers. And the guy next to me was from the South. He also had whiskey in there too, which is a no-no. But you did get them from the South, different parts of the country. And but the military kind of smooths that out, because I don't care where you came from, you're here. And so don't give us any more of the complaining about the food. That they were always complaining about the food, but and the medical services were very adequate. because you would get inspections every once in a while. But anyway,
Thank you, sir.
you're welcome.
Thank you so much for your service. Thank you for sharing your story with us today.
It's been a privilege.